welcome to this episode of Dive Into Reiki. And today I'm super excited. I have two very, very, very special guests, and they live in Europe. And they actually are the author of a book called Women in Reiki that sheds light on beyond Mrs. Takata. We always hear about Mrs. Takata. We don't hear of all the other women that had a very important role in the practice around the world. So please, a big welcome to Amanda and Silke. And they're going to introduce themselves instead of me saying the short bio and butchering it. So Amanda, tell us a little bit about where do you your Reiki background and a little bit about you.
So I started Reiki in 2002 in Japan. I was living in Japan, and so I learned out there. And my teachers were Chiyoko Yamaguchi and her son Tadao Yamaguchi. So I learned there for a while, and then I actually started to travel and teach. And now I am living in Folkestone in southeast England. And so I live here. I teach Reiki in Kent, in various places in Kent, and I treat people from here as well. And I also still travel a little and teach. And aside from that, I do a bit of writing, as well as this book. I do my own stuff. So I'm enjoying life here in England now.
Amazing. Silke, tell us a little bit about you.
Yeah, I'm from Germany, but I also started abroad with Reiki in Argentina, where I was studying in 1999. I took my first Reiki degrees with Claudio Marquez in Buenos Aires. This was kind of a William Rand lineage that I first learned. When after coming back home to Germany, I continued learning with Franca Javapeta, who lived in kind of a neighboring city of mine. So we got quite close into contact. I also became the editor of his books in German. And through him, I also met Tadao Yamaguchi. So I started with Jikiden Reiki in 2004 for the first time. And since then, or not since then, but 1 year later, I became Jikiden Reiki teacher. And so I'm mainly teaching Jikiden Reiki, also meditation. And as Amanda, I also have this other side of my profession, that I'm a writer and a literary translator from Spanish to German, mainly. I translate novels, poetry, children's books, a little bit of everything.
Oh, beautiful. And I don't know if one of you two want to say very shortly what's Jikiden Reiki, because a lot of people, they're not familiar with different schools. So if you can define what Jikiden Reiki is very easily, so people have an idea.
I'll try and make it short. So Jikiden Reiki is basically Chiyoko Yamaguchi, who started Jikiden Reiki along with her son Tadao Yamaguchi. So she learnt from Hayashi sensei, Chujiro Hayashi. Many people know of him because he was Takata's teacher, right? And so she learnt from him when she was 17 years old in 1938. And she and her entire family actually learned. And so they used it throughout their lives. And so Chiyoko Yamaguchi continued using it with her family, with friends, with neighbors, and with people who came to see her for treatments for more than 65 years, actually. And she was just kind of simply doing that in her life. And through a series of incidents, which would just be too long to go into now, somebody found her, if you like, that was looking for the roots of Reiki in Japan, and discovered that she was really the only person that they could find in Japan who had learned with Hayashi sensei. And so then she was persuaded, after it took a little persuasion, but she was persuaded to begin teaching freely to foreigners as well as to Japanese people in kind of bigger seminars. And so she and her son, to do that, founded what they called Jikiden Reiki. And they actually only founded it in 1999, and the first seminar was in 2000. And Jikiden means directly passed down. And so they wanted, Chiyoko Sensei was very much about honoring the teachers who came before her. And so she was very concerned about not not kind of displeasing, if you like, Hayashi sensei and his wife, and honoring what it was that they taught. And so this idea of using Jikiden directly passed down was her way of making sure that she was going to use exactly what she'd learned from them, basically. And so Jikiden Reiki kind of grew from there, from Kyoto out, and has become much bigger now.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that explanation. And what I love is how many lineages, and like the more we found history, we're finding, you know, all this beautiful information, which we hadn't when I started Reiki in early 2000s. You know, people had no idea yet about where things were. We're just starting to get all this information. But I wanted to ask you, and I ask this every guest, and I'm gonna go to Silke because I wanted to see, like, how did you suddenly decided to, I want to train in Reiki? What was your first Reiki experience that you said, this is for me?
Yeah, in fact, it was a very practical experience, which is probably the best way to get to know Reiki, I feel. I had never heard about it, but my yoga teacher in Argentina, she was just learning Reiki and in fact becoming a Reiki master at that time. And so she offered me a session after a yoga class. And yeah, it was beautiful and impressed me very much. I especially remember when she put her hands on the back of my head, but I really was laying that I felt like directly connected to the whole universe. No, it was a really strong experience of oneness. And in this moment, it was clear to me, wow, I want to learn this. I don't really know what it is, but it feels good. I want to do it. And this was the starting point for me. I had to travel quite far then because I was based in Cordoba in Argentina. And this is like, it's like 800, 900 kilometers from Buenos Aires. And Buenos Aires was the only possibility to learn it in Argentina back then in 1999. No? So I took that ride and yeah. And it was strange because the first seminar, it was not so convincing to me because, I mean, it was like what in many Western styles lineages is taught, very basic and quite, I don't know if to say basic, but a mixture of different things. Now there were lots of talking about chakras and crystals and this and that, no? And it was not so much the purity that so often stands for Japanese culture, no? If you dig a little bit deeper. But still, even without being so convinced of the seminar, the practice convinced me a lot. So I practiced very intensely on myself, with my friends, also with my yoga teacher friends who opened a Reiki school back then. And in fact, it has been ever since, because I mean, it was never my idea to become like a full-time therapist, Reiki teacher or whatever. But the practice always kept so convincing that I just keep doing it, no? And it led me to become a teacher when with Franca Javapeta to start editing his books. I translated Nathalie Yamaguchi's books into German. So this is my way of uniting kind of different talents maybe I have, no? What I can do. And now I enjoy a lot teaching and giving sessions. But on the practical side, I think the nicest thing is if you manage to inspire people to learn for themselves. I think this is what I enjoy most about Reiki practice, because when you know, they can help themselves, they can inspire others to do more of it. This is maybe the most satisfying part of it.
And I really love what you said about bringing everything we are into our practice, right? Bringing all those talents together to decide what kind of Reiki practitioner you will be, right? Like if you have talents like writing or painting, like they don't need to be left to the side. So thank you so much for sharing that beautiful story. Amanda, how did you find Reiki? How did Reiki do like this to you?
Well, actually, it first went like this a long time before I started, because I used to work in mental health down in Cornwall in England. And I ran a mental health helpline for the local health authority there. And I worked with various psychologists and psychiatrists and things, and you know, I had intended to become a psychologist, and I just wasn't impressed with the system as it was. I felt like there was some more I could do another way, and I didn't know what it was. And then I heard about Reiki, and for some reason I didn't know anything about it, but I was like, oh, this might be it, even though I didn't really know what it was. And so then I kind of went on this journey, both physically, because I started traveling around the world, and at the same time, I was looking for a Reiki teacher everywhere I went to kind of learn about it and find somebody to learn from. And I just couldn't find what felt like the right teacher. And that was really important to me, to find the right teacher. And so on I went. And then eventually I gave up because I just couldn't find somebody that I really felt that kind of spark to learn with. So I went to Japan to teach English in the end. And it was only there that I was finally introduced to Chiyoko Yamaguchi. And as soon as I was introduced to her, as soon as I walked into her flat, I was like, this is it. This is what I was waiting for. And this is the teacher that I've been kind of looking for, you know? And so it was fascinating to me that it was really through kind of stopping and giving up that I ended up in the right place, basically, to find the right teacher.
I feel that feeling, right? And respecting that feeling, like, this is not the right person, I'm not going to rush. That is very important. And I did the opposite. So I will really recommend people to do what you did, right? Okay, where's the closest teacher in New York? Oh yeah, half a day. Oh, $100 for a class. This is perfect, 4 hours, right? Do not do like Nathalie, do like Amanda, please.
Well, I mean, that was also a personal journey for me, was to listen to my intuition more and more. So I was kind of really trying to play with that as well. So
no,
yeah.
I think it's great. It's also, you know, really chatting with your teacher before committing to the class and getting that feeling.
I think that's important. Yeah, to have some kind of connection.
Yeah, I think it's both. Now, the one side, the Reiki is calling, and you can feel it probably with every teacher, even if the teacher is not the right one for you. But it was a very different click if you find the right person also, no?
It's like dating. It doesn't mean the teacher is not great. It means it's not the teacher for you, right? But for me, it's almost like dating. Like, it has to be right for it to work. Like, and you can always learn from any teacher, but the right teacher will really bring your journey forward. So you're in Germany and Argentina, Japan and England. I know you both do Jikiden Reiki and there is Peter or Java probably in common, but how did you meet? Like, how did you hi, I like you, let's write a book together? How did that happen?
Well, we first met in 2006, actually. I keep thinking it's 4, but it was 6, because I left Japan at that time, and I was going to start to travel and teach. And Tadao Sensei said to me, "Oh, I'm going to teach in Germany. Will you come along, you know, to that one?" So I said, "Yeah, I'll meet you in Germany." So I kind of went via China and then went to Germany. And it was at that point in time that I met Silke. And just like we were saying, you know, when you have that kind of spark, that match, as soon as we met, we got on like a house on fire, and it was just lovely. And so that was the first meeting. I'll let you go on to.
Oh, I don't have to get the whole chronologically right now. Yeah, because we didn't even see so much in the first years, no? But at some point we intensified the contact and met in different countries. Also in Belgium we once met, now where you taught, and I came to join your seminar. And since then we have traveled to Japan 2 times together. We have seen each other in Germany, in England. It doesn't matter so much where, no? I think if there's the will to meet, you can meet wherever. And of course, we also had lots of contact via Zoom and via Skype, also when we were writing, because we were talking constantly to each other, no? And so it was not possible always to be in the same place in the world. But yeah, it has really been a very special journey and collaboration. No? I think for both of us, it was the first big collaboration project, like a big book that we decided to do it together, and we really did it together, the whole process. No? And yeah, it was good. And I really think it was enriching to the book that we had our both perspectives, and we decided we want to write it like one, but both of us are writing. No, that's very different from saying we have 2 voices in it. No, but we managed to do it as one, and it was interesting. And yeah, we hope people like it now, because also, yeah, I mean, you as a writer, you know the editing process that is happening when you're just writing on your own, no? And if you're doing it with another person and both have exactly the same right, and of course, it's not my mother language, for Amanda it is, no? So, yeah, but it was lots of fun also. That's, I think, basic of our friendship also, no? That it's also fun what we're doing, more fun than suffering.
Yeah, no, I think I did a book at two hands and it went very well, but I've also heard experiences where there is not that respect and clarity and support, and it's been hell. So I think it's fantastic that you join a forces, because also I think when you're in the creative writing, sometimes you write something, it's very clear to you, and then the other person is like, what are you writing? That makes no sense,
We
right?
were
So
talking about this earlier on, weren't we?
yeah, so I think for me, and for me, it's like when it works, as you said, it's that spark, right? When you have a respectful partnership that builds and is not criticism, it's just building up, like, hey, can we improve this? Then I think it's fantastic. And Amanda, I know you have the book with you there. I don't know if you can show it to camera. I had the idea it was a tiny book, and it's actually a huge book.
No,
And
it's big. It's very
yeah,
big.
it's and so I think it's fantastic because a lot of time when we talk about Reiki, a lot of the books really have the same perspectives. And lately we're really expanding. And one thing I found very interesting is telling the stories of women in Reiki, because beyond Mrs. Takata, we'll always hear mostly about Chihiro Hayashi or some of the other Japanese. We don't hear a lot about the role of many of the women in Reiki. So I wanted to get a little bit, first of all, why it was much needed, but before you two came with the idea, like, there wasn't a book like this. So why did you wake up one day and say, like, we have to do a book about women in Reiki? What was the spark or the research or something that you came up with the idea?
Well, the spark comes from Silke, so I'm going to let her.
Yeah, in fact, it was more like, I don't know where the spark had its origin, but it came to me during a meditation, where I think it was in summer 2018. And yeah, during the meditation, I just had this very clear idea, well, there's not enough written about women in Reiki. And why is this? There are so many women who are practicing nowadays, but also back in times. And yeah, so I often get my ideas in meditation, no? That I just, there's comes something and very strongly, and I think, well, this something has to be done about it. And because it was about women, and also because Amanda and I were close friends, now the first thing was, oh, I will ask Amanda if we can do it together, because the idea was right from the beginning, it should be a community project. No, I just want to write about one woman or one women perspective. I would like it to be about many women. Yeah, and so we started. No, Amanda, you said yes right away. This was great, and we started with a part of a book that are interviews with contemporary Reiki teachers, female Reiki teachers, which all learned Reiki like we did, but are working in different countries, in Canada, England, in Germany, Japan, and while we are working. I think the idea came a little later, Amanda, that we thought, it would be really good to collect the stories of the early women in Reiki, like we are calling them, no? To show that we have Mikao Usui, we have Chuyo Hayashi, but who else? Because both of them, unfortunately, they didn't even live to teach so very long, no? And how did the practice manage to be kept alive, no? And this has so much to do with the women who were practicing. Yeah, and so we got more excited about the project, I think, now, because we saw there's really so much into it, and it also was an occasion for us to answer some questions that we had ourselves. No, I mean, this is one of the purposes of writing, I guess, but to really go deeper, no, and you go until you find the answer. Do you have anything to add, Amanda?
Well, just it felt like we had these we were beginning the interviews with the contemporary women, as you were saying, but they were kind of hanging there, and it felt like we needed the foundation that they came from, it was missing. And so it became clear very quickly, actually, didn't it, that was what we wanted, was to include and bring in all these many women who were part of keeping Reiki going, and actually it would have died out without them.
Yeah, yes. Very strong base, no, that you could see that it's really the community that it's built on, no, and I think it's still true today somehow, no, that I think there are so many women practicing in their local environment, doing the treatments for family, friends, themselves, no. Yeah.
No, I think it's interesting because, for example, for the podcast, like, it's easier for me when I Google to meet people, like, probably I will say male practitioners tend to go to the top, maybe because they're more outgoing, or they publish more books, or they don't have to care for a family and they can go to Japan 6 months and do research, or they're scholars. So sometimes I feel like I know that they're like probably 90% of the practitioners are female, but because a lot of time we have our practice or friends, or we do hospitals where sometimes our voices as not as public as we would want. And I think books like yours, or like podcasts like these, or other podcasts as well, like Reiki Radio or anything, are trying to bring those voices up. And I think that is very important with respect, right? It's not about one better than the other, but let's have the voices at the end. Again, 90% of practitioners probably tend to be female or identify as female, right? So I think it's fantastic. So I would love if you can tell me about, we all know about Mrs. Takata, but is there any other women or a couple of women from that root, that foundation, that gave us this gift to all women, current women? If you want to mention perhaps a couple of them, or a story that struck you that was very interesting when you were researching. You're smiling and laughing. Huh?
No. I think we're going, who's going first? Yeah. Well, I mean, I know, there's a lot of women that without whom, like we said, this wouldn't be existing. So we have, Chie Hayashi, there's a lot there, which Silke will go into a bit more, which is obviously Chujiro Hayashi's wife. And she played such a huge role in continuing things. There's a woman called Chio Sugano, who was a very good friends with Chie Hayashi, and she plays a very important role, and she's actually Chiyoko Yamaguchi's aunt. And as I said, there was like a lot of women in her family who were, in fact, women and men in Chiyoko Sensei's family who were practicing. Sorry, my notifications are on. So and then there's the list goes on basically, but there's interesting stories about Chie Hayashi and Chio Sugano. I'm going to let Silke maybe look at them a bit more, but I think for me, I don't know if you haven't done Jikiden Reiki, you probably don't know much about Chiyoko Yamaguchi, and I just think, for me, she's a very a person you can learn a lot from, and one, because as I said, she did Reiki, she practiced Reiki hands-on for 65 years, right? Wow. This is longer than anyone else that we know of.
No one. Yeah, probably the longest in history of Reiki, right?
Right. Her sister as well, though, Katsue, also did it for this long, and so, she had an incredible array of experience to learn from, it's phenomenal, really. And I think, what is key about her, for me, there's many things, and I do write about them in the book, but like, she was still doing the same thing. So she practiced for 65 years, right? So she had all those years to enhance and improve, but it didn't need enhancing and improving. She was doing the same thing she learned from Hayashi Sensei when she was 17 years old in 1938. There was no change, because what happened was, of course, over time, apart from the fact that in Japanese tradition, you don't change what your teacher taught you, there's a very deep understanding she had of the depth that was in that simplicity, and how it's only by sitting there with her hands on, for 65 years that she got to experience what she did, that she got to a place where her treatments were phenomenal. Like the results she got from them were huge, And what was really also very beautiful was, I met her, of course, just in the last year of her life, basically. And, I went to everything I could and learned what I could from her. But she struck me as like she could be childlike around Reiki, this like wonder around it, this humility around it. She still had it. So that when she gave a treatment, because I would go help with treatment sometimes, she gave a treatment and she would be so excited the next time that they came to see what had happened since the last treatment, and to see how they were doing. she would be excited about that, you know. And when she talked about the stories from which she had amazing stories about treating burns and different conditions, you know, and these amazing things that had happened. And she talked about them so she would like shine when she spoke about them, you know. She was excited about it. She loved it. And she never lost that gratitude and respect that she had for it. And, you know, I had treatments from her, and I remember I had them right before I learned, because I had a problem in my stomach. But I remember being so like, huh? Because, you know, I felt so much happening in my stomach where she was treating. I actually felt like she was like pushing. I expected to see this old woman, you know, standing on the table, pushing down like with a thumb or a big, you know, stick, because I could feel this thing going in, you know. And I kind of like looked up and peeked, and she was like this, half asleep, you know, just with her hands on me, you know. And I was like, how can it be this simple? How can it be this simple? But it is, and it was, and she continued that, thank God, simplicity for 65 years, because now we have access and can begin to understand and hopefully emulate that simplicity and the lack of need to be adding things and changing them, you know. It was beautiful. But she had many fabulous stories, you know, and she was also just a beautiful mother, grandmother. She liked to go have coffee jelly at the local cafe, you know. She was normal. And I think for me this was important in a teacher. I wanted a teacher that was grounded, normal, what's normal, but grounded and human, yeah. And she had such warmth and love emanating from her, you know. This is Reiki, kindness, you know, this too. So yeah, so I'll pass to you, because I could talk forever.
That's fantastic. I listen, like, for me, what you said is 65 years of the same hands position, and the evolution is not adding more techniques, it's not adding more tools, it's just deepening your connection, deepening your understanding. It's a state of mind, right? And the simpler we keep the practice, the more we can get into that beautiful space of stillness and allow it to do what it needs to do, right? It's allowing.
That's exactly it. That is exactly it. And I think if you try too hard and start to look for something better or more powerful, you miss exactly what you just said. You miss the stillness that takes you deeper and deeper and deeper. And that's where you get the aha moments and the greater insight and the greater connection, you know, is from this. So yeah, you're absolutely right.
You put in beautiful words. It's funny because sometimes I tell my students, like, and because I'm probably the most imperfect teacher and student, like I go through all these fears. So I ask them, when you want something to be more powerful, where is that need coming from?
Yeah,
you know, it comes from worry. So go back to the precepts, right? And it's okay that you feel it. You just need to handle it. A lot of us will have those feelings our whole life, but don't fight them. Take it with compassion and then go to stillness. But always ask yourself, why do I want to learn another technique? Why do I want to go to another level? And the way you put the stories and you use a word is just beautiful, right? Is you miss that stillness. It's a beautiful way. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, I wish I had known her. Silke, you're not escaping.
Yeah.
I have to say, I had never heard of Chie Hayashi, and I've been reading a lot, and I just read about Chie Hayashi like 2 months ago in another book from a Japanese man who he started with Western and then started researching. So I've been reading a lot of Japanese people talking about Reiki lately, but I had never even known that, because Hayashi, I was always told, like, he taught Mrs. Takata and he had no personal life, he was this officer. So tell us a little bit about her.
Yeah, I mean, we can tell not too much because it was hard to research the history of women. I mean, I think in any time, in any culture, it's a little harder to find information about women. This is true for Japan also. But in the end, we were quite happy because we found quite some information on her, which was amazing, because we feared first it would not be possible, but then it was possible, because he was an officer, that's true, but he was married and he also had a daughter and a son. So he had his family life, and as far as we know, the family also supported him in his Reiki clinic in Tokyo. They had a family home in Atami, close to Mount Fuji, but also with practice rooms where he did his teaching, and the sessions where also Mrs. Takata went in 1935 when she came to Japan. And in fact, also the daughters, Hawaii Takata's eldest daughter and the daughter of Hayashi, they became friends. So there were quite a lot of family relations between them. This is nice to know also, no, that it was, I mean, it always seems so far off in history, but if we go a little bit deeper into details, we see that also in history, people were persons like we are now, relating personally and making their experience and all this. And so Chie Hayashi supposedly was also working with him in his Reiki clinic, maybe also taking care of the clinic while he was doing this long trip to Hawaii. In 1937, 1938, Mrs. Takata had invited Hayashi to Hawaii, and he went there for over half a year with his daughter. Probably Mrs. Hayashi was taking care then. But more importantly, when he took his life in 1940, I mean, this is always taught in the Reiki courses, no, that he took his life because he was asked for information about Hawaii for the coming war, the attack on Pearl Harbor that Japan was planning already. And because he didn't want to give his information, having visited there recently and making friends with Hawaiian people, he committed suicide in 1940. And this was not very well seen by the official Japanese government of the time, of the ruling classes that were mainly Navy classes. And so it was hard to find a successor for his institute. He had this Hayashi Reiki Institute. He had separated some years ago from the Usui Reiki Ryoho Gakkai. And now for all the male students or male teachers of the institute, because the founder had committed suicide and was seen like somebody who had kind of committed
dishonor.
It was like a dishonorable death. I mean, he saved his honor, but it was hard to step into his position as the institute leader. And so in the end, his wife, Chie Hayashi, decided to become the leader. And she took over the institute and took over the responsibility for around 5,000 students of the Hayashi Reiki Institute that were there at this time. This was not a small number. And she continued also to travel to other places in Japan where he had been going, like to Ishikawa Prefecture, where Chiyoko Yamaguchi and her whole family had learned. And so we really, when we thought about it, or we talked a lot about it, Amanda, no, we really thought it's amazing. I mean, she lost her husband due to this Reiki, and then after that she takes over and continues his work, no? I mean, this is so much love and dedication in this, and also so much resilience to have the power to carry on, no? And it was very nice because in our book, and also with the help of Justin Stein, I think you had him on your interviews also, no?
We did a great interview. We had lots of fun together, yes.
Yeah, because he helped us to find some, he brought us in contact with a guy from Hawaii who had traveled with his family to Japan in 1949, and he took his Shoden class with Chie Hayashi in Tokyo. So he could tell us about his experience, and he gave us his certificates, photographers of his certificates. So we really had proof for this that she kept teaching. We had seen certificates before that are from the Yamaguchi family, but this was kind of outside of what came from the Yamaguchi lineage. So it was really, really great. And the other very nice finding was that there was also a letter that Chie Hayashi wrote to Mrs. Takata in Hawaii at the end of the 50s, because this showed that they were still in touch, no, after all these years. And it was a very nice letter where Chie Hayashi expressed her gratitude and also honoring all what Mrs. Takata had done for Reiki in Hawaii, no? So it was really, really nice to see that with continuity, that she did it until the end of her life, no? And she also kept going to Ishikawa, where the Yamaguchi family was living and practicing Reiki. As Amanda mentioned before, she was good friends with Chiyo Sugano, the aunt of Chiyoko Yamaguchi. I mean, we know all these Japanese names are very confusing if you hear them just quite quickly, but in our book we put some kind of family trees, so we hope this will be a little bit clearer also for people who have more like a visual tendency to understand who is who in this Reiki world.
No, I love that. And also, like, at that time Japan, it was quite hard, like, you know, we are not familiar, but those times with the war and after the war were very hard, and especially also with the influence of the US, where traditional medicine was taking over a lot faster. And these things were almost not prosecuted, but they were not as well seen as before. So they really persisted in a time that was not as easy.
Yeah, it was really not okay to teach Reiki. And, you know, when the American government, you know, did change things after the war, they really made it, it's not okay to teach or use anything that was kind of considered folk remedy, like any hand healing or anything like this, as well as anything connected to martial arts and all those kind of things. And so it really did become taboo, and you weren't allowed to practice it openly. So I think this is something, there was so much writing this, where, you know, Silke and I would kind of come across stuff, and then, you know, we would get new appreciations of what it was they did and what they sacrificed and the decisions that they made and how hard that must have been. The resilience of these women is phenomenal to keep going through these times, you know. And, you know, during the war, like the you know, all their stuff was burned in Tokyo, you know, they lost it all, but they kept going, you know. It's really quite incredible. And then, like you say, it became almost illegal. Certainly it wasn't allowed, and you weren't allowed to openly practice or teach, but she just kept going. And it's phenomenal. I really think it is. And without them, we wouldn't know any of the stuff that we know.
I'm thinking it's funny, like, obviously Mikao Usui created the practice, right? But then if you think about it, without these women, Mrs. Takata and them, there will be no Reiki anywhere.
No,
right?
You wouldn't.
So I think it's like we forget that role. And I think with these conversations becoming even more clear how beautiful. And also, again, I love that word resilient. Like, yes, sometimes we women may not be the most outspoken, we're not there, but we are resilient and we keep going, right? And I think that is a beautiful quality we have now. And hopefully our voices now also will be also a little bit louder, more and more. But I love that story of resilience. And I didn't know how hard it was like, I've been studying more Japan the last few years. I'm like, dude, if they had burned like 2/3 of my city, my husband was dead, we had almost no food, and it was forbidden, would have keep on doing it.
Yeah.
Maybe privately in my bathroom, yes, but I don't know if I'll have the guts to go there. It's also being very honest, you know, like I grew up in Venezuela, it was very violent, and it wasn't nowhere close, and it was really hard to even live the everyday life when there were like, you know, coup d'etat and bombs falling. You just get really scared. So putting the context for me also heightens, like, as you say, how resilient and brave they were, right? And I think it's beautiful. And I think also that's part of the culture as well. Like, for example, a lot of martial arts were also banned, and then they came back in the 60s and 70s, for which I'm very grateful as well. So I love that. And then Mrs. Takata, you hear a lot of very different stories of Mrs. Takata, right? A lot of people like really still respect, and they literally keep her tradition, almost like the way Jikiden, right? As we see from Mrs. Takata. Other people kind of criticize her Americanization. But again, we have put things into context. She changed the story a little bit because it was World War II, and Japanese things were not like, hey, cool Japanese like today, right? So can you give us perhaps a different view, or what's your view of Mrs. Takata after this research?
Yeah, I was very much impressed by her way of moving between the countries and moving between the cultures also, no? In a time where this was much less common than it is nowadays. Because she was born in Hawaii in 1900. She was already an American citizen, because by when Hawaii was part of America, but her environment was more Japanese, her way of being educated. Her parents had been immigrants from Japan. She had gone to a Japanese school and an English school, so she was, I guess, she had good Japanese also, no? But still, when she came to Japan in 1935 with this wish to learn Reiki, she really had to fight to convince Chuyo Hayashi to teach her, because in Japan, she was not seen as a real Japanese because she was born outside. And still in Hawaii, probably she was also part of a minority group, no? So she had no real home, or, well, yeah, I think nowadays many of us know this feeling, but it must have been hard. And also, once she convinced Hayashi to teach her, and when she came back to Hawaii, started her business, 1937, 1938, it became fairly popular. She had many students, and then puff starts the war, no? And suddenly she's teaching a technique that comes from the enemy country. So she had to cut it down right away, no? And yet also a very passionate practitioner, no? She kept doing it, and she was on her own also, no? Amanda, you mentioned before that Chiyoko Yamaguchi learned in an environment with all her family. There were many of them. They were supporting each other. They could exchange experiences, whatever. And Mrs. Takata in Hawaii was I think the only teacher. She had students, but probably no other teachers around at that time. And she also couldn't be in contact with her teacher. Hayashi was not alive anymore, and there was no possibility to communicate with others in Japan. So I really have lots of admiration for that, no? How she kept going. And I mean, I know when I started learning Reiki, and I couldn't see the sense of some of the things that I were learning, when I thought, why did she change so much? But seeing it in retrospective, what she did and how she managed to conserve the core of it, the essence of it, and how she managed to inspire so many people to keep doing Reiki, how it spread from there to the whole world, no? I think she really did a fantastic job, no? Even if there are things that we could criticize, no? But her love and passion for the Reiki must have been so strong. It's really cool, yeah.
Yeah, and I think without those changes, we probably will not have Reiki, right? It will have died with the families in Japan because it will not have taken over. So always, like, now with the centenary of Reiki and Mikao Usui and all of that, for me, it's like he wanted to take those spiritual practices that were for like probably a minority of people. With time and education, he wanted to take it more global. And I think in a way it's beautiful how 100 years after it's been fulfilled, right? Like, so as you say, like when we understand her context. And the other thing is she also had a family life. I always say as Mrs. Takata single, she actually also had kids and everything, right? She was very human as well.
And a single mother, right? Because her husband died when the children were younger. So that's tough, right? Yeah.
We again see that resilience, and that takes me a little bit resilience, because I still feel nowadays us female practitioners are still very resilient, and males too, right? Like but we keep, and we're very consistent, unless for me it's like most people take a class, 90% drop out, and the 10% who keep the practice, they keep it for life. So what is the role of Reiki, of women in Reiki nowadays? Well, because you talk to a lot of practitioners from all around the world. So what is your point of view on that a little bit, or when you realize what's happening?
Do you mean like, what do we see the role of women now?
Yeah, or their experience, or like what were some of their experience, or like some of the shares that you think, okay.
Oh, the in our book, you mean these people?
Yeah.
Ah, now I understand. Yeah,
or your opinion, like you could have been more polite in your book and you want to be less polite in this podcast. Well, right? Like, but a little bit like we were the resilient, we were like the ones keeping this tradition alive. And now that there is a big resurgence, like as people who identify as female, it'll be what has been the experience or the role.
Yeah, I think, the doing these interviews with, was it 9 people, wasn't it, altogether, was really beautiful, because, and you spoke to this earlier actually, Nathalie, because you were talking about using Reiki in our own specific way, right? So each of us has, I always like to think of a piece of the puzzle. Like we each have something to contribute to the world, to Reiki, to everything. And what was beautiful about these interviews was we really saw 9 people who have learnt exactly the same thing, because they were all Jikiden Reiki practitioners that we had access to. So they've learned exactly the same thing, and yet they're all doing different things, but using the same practice in the same way. And it was really beautiful to see and learn more about these people. And you know, some people, there's one lady who initially got into it because her child was extremely sick and had a terrible case of eczema, and such that, you know, this poor child couldn't, you know, was just covered head to foot, absolutely covered in open sores, you know, and she used Reiki to completely eliminate this, you know. And so now her life is dedicated to her family. She has a lovely young family, or older family now, and she uses it in the family every day to help all of her children and her husband, as well as having a Reiki practice. And she talks in the book about how she juggled that when they were younger, and how she, you know, had all the kids there for breakfast, sent them all off to school, and then she would have her Reiki people coming. And, you know, so you've got people using it in this way with family, and then you've got, there's an interesting lady from Japan who was using it. She has like a breastfeeding clinic, and she worked with midwives a great deal, and so they've used it in a midwife center that they this group of midwives created. And so it's really interesting, like she's promoting natural childbirth and natural breastfeeding and using Reiki within this. And, you know, and then there's a lady in Germany who works, you know, teaching and treating people, but has more of a psychological perspective with it, you know. And then it's just fascinating, like all these different stories. And in every single one of them, you see the same things. You see community, right? Whatever that is within their particular sphere, you see this community happening, and that may just be them and their family. You know, you don't have to, when you're practicing Reiki, like you alluded to earlier, you don't have to go out there and become a practitioner. You don't have to make money from it. You don't have to, you know, you can just use it for yourself and your loved ones, you know, whoever they are. And that is perfect as it is, and it will enhance your life and their life, and it will bring in greater connection, which is another thing that you see throughout all of the stories, both the former, the older Japanese generation we were talking about, and now you see, you know, greater connection happening, and each person has different stories about how they kind of connected with Reiki, with others, with spirit, whatever it is, you know. I think it's beautiful. So you see these throughout.
I think you highlighted something very important. I think sometimes, and this is probably also more of a US phenomenon, because when I talk to European practitioners, honestly, the feeling I get is very different. But here, and I'm sure like a lot of people practice for themselves, the loved ones, but there is a lot of feeling that if I'm not getting followers on Instagram, or I'm not getting money enough, or it's not growing my business, my practice is wrong. Like there is a judgment on your practice. And I think we need to separate that. Like, you know, like one thing is perhaps you're not meant to have a Reiki business, or perhaps you're just meant to have a business class and learn how to market yourself. But you practice your practice, and you measure it by, as you say, like, are you making more connections? Are you feeling more connected, more content, more calm? And I would love for people to know that, to have the freedom, like you can be a Reiki 1 your whole life. You can do 5 times a Reiki 3 and still not teach. We all need to find what is right for us, and let go of the need, like followers or money or income.
Yeah.
Have nothing to do with the depth of your practice. And for some people, yes, it coincides. Or for example, for me, I love giving sessions. I like to give 2 sessions a week. That's what, because then I'm like excited. I'm not a person who can live from, and giving myself permission, that is okay. I like doing podcasts and writing. That's where my talent with Reiki lies, right? So I think giving that freedom, and the way you put it was very, very beautiful, right? Like this is a gift, this community and connection and depth of practice, right? Silke,
Yeah,
I
I
see
think,
you.
yeah,
You're
I think it's also good not to compare oneself, no, in general, and also regarding this, no, and this might be the problem if you go back to the beginning with many male teachers who are stepping more out, who are traveling, who are giving big seminars or speaking on congresses. This might give the idea that this means to be a good Reiki practitioner, a big Reiki teacher, no, and I think this is really, it's not correct, just, no, and we can see it, or I think we all know that in the local practice there are so many women who are doing it, because if you are kind of one of the big guys who's going around traveling, you will have problems to have so much occasion to practice or to give continuous series of sessions, no, because you're just not at one place. It's like a like a different position that is not better or worse, but it's just different, no, and we definitely shouldn't compare ourselves with that, no, but feel the the worth of our treatment as it is happening, no, and not thinking, oh, I would need to read the right room or the right session or the right advertisement, but it can happen everywhere. No? You can be seeing in a playground a child that hurts itself, and you go and put your hands on it. That's the perfect setting, no. And I think that's more a female problem sometimes, no, that women feel less confident about what they are doing in general, no, and also we can see it in the Reiki practice. And I would really like to encourage everybody to take very important what she is doing, no, or what women are doing, because it's a great work. And Reiki in the beginning, it was also intended for that, no, to help you in your family life, to help yourself and your loved ones to be better, no. And if you look like this kind of Confucian logic, no, this is where it all starts, no. If you have peace at home and with yourself, it will expand. So it's really not little what we can do in our daily environment.
Yeah. And, Chiyoko sensei as well, she really stressed daily practice, but that doesn't mean you have to have a Reiki client a day. That means you put your hands on yourself or someone else every day. And that might be just yourself, or it might be your pet, or it might be your partner, and you just putting your hands on because they've got a headache or a stomach ache, or so she really stressed this, using it every day and making it part of life. So it's not this big thing that you do in addition to your life, right? It just is part of every day. It's a part, and Reiki itself, the energy, is a part of life, and so it's the same thing, it's not this special thing that makes us special, or that we're not good enough to do, any of that, it's just part of life. That's it.
And I'm not going to add to that, because you said it so beautifully that I'm not going to take the flavor away, because you just, for me, like what you said is like really both of you the core of this practice. So I'm not going to destroy your beautiful language. I'm going to leave it at that. And I'm really grateful you're highlighting that, because I think a lot of us sometimes go through that, or sometimes you're very clear and then you see like, oh, but that person has 15,000 followers and they're making $70,000 a month and I'm not. Well, honestly, who cares, right? As you said, don't compare yourself, center yourself, and daily practice. So I wanted to ask, because, and you mentioned it too, right? We're not, sometimes it's like, I'm a special person who's channeling some amazing stuff, or I'm not good enough. But actually, we're all very human. And we all, as we do this journey, we forget that we start knowing nothing is a practice that is very different from the way we're educated in the West, right? It's non-linear. It's a mind-body thing. So we're supposed to do mistakes to learn. And I say mistakes in quote marks, right? Because they're just like, it's the way you grow your perception, your understanding. So I wanted if each of you can share a teachable lesson or oops, or a moment where like you deepen your practice, but with a sense of humor. Most of you were laughing like, oh my God, like look at what I did, right? That moment that really deepened your practice.
Silke, do you want to go first?
Okay, I can start. Yeah. I will in fact talk about something that happened during writing the book. No, there's indirect connection to Reiki, because what was really remarkable, as we told before, we were working closely together on the whole manuscript, sending it back and forth, and I was quite stunned how hard it was to really transfer meaning at some points, no? How even, I mean, we know each other well. I think we have fairly similar opinions on many things, but sometimes it was just that something totally different came across, no, and totally misunderstanding even between us. And yeah, this really, it made me think a lot, and showed me that it's really difficult to convey meaning through words, even if you're a person who can write, no, but that for other person it might mean something different. And also we saw sometimes that it brought up topics, no, that somehow, yeah, feel if maybe it's not easy to get corrected, or you feel the other one always wants to know the one who knows better, or I feel not so confident because my English is not so good. No, it can trigger you even. And it was very interesting process to go through this, no, and to also see what is coming up if we have to go over the same paragraph for the 10th time and we're still not happy, no. And in some moments it was hard, and some it was very easy. And I think especially when we wrote about Reiki, our conception of Reiki, no, this was maybe where it was a little bit easier, because the Reiki was more flowing through it probably, no. But it was, I think it gave me kind of humility, no, because I'm a words person and I have translated so many books by now, and I fairly think I transmitted correctly or adequately, no. But after now writing with Amanda, I'm not so sure anymore, and I double check more often, because I feel that many of the problems between people probably come from the same thing, no, that you're really not understanding that even if you both have a good intention, that it's hard to exactly mean the same thing. So it was not so much a oops moment, but something one of the big insights from this project, and to see how can you come together again, no, if this happens.
And I think also it's very valuable advice for people who are teaching at the end, conveying the meaning of what the practice is or the symbols are. So that's where like the experience, making the classes very experienced, is so important as well, because it's easier to place your hands than trying to convey the meaning often. So I really appreciate that you shared that. Amanda, what was your oops?
I would say I have quite a few oopses, but I'm just trying to think, like, I think, maybe one thing that has really helped me teach people is the fact that, we teach in Jikiden Reiki, we talk about Byosen. I don't know if you know. Yeah, some people just
pronounce it. Always call it Byosen. Also, we call it Hibiki sometimes. So yes.
Right. So the Byosen and the Byosen that Chiyoko Yamaguchi learned is, it has like 5 different levels, and you're looking for all these different sensations, and she was very clear on how this will inform the entire treatment, right? Where you are, how long you're there, all these kind of things. And so Byosen was, it's really one of the key foundations of your treatment, right? And I couldn't feel it at all when I learned. I couldn't feel it. And so here I was, the person who lived, it was just me who were at the time, that was living close by and learning with them all the time, that was non-Japanese. There were other people came in to learn, but they were coming for a short time and then leaving, and so I was the one that was lucky enough to have this connection. I was helping with the books. I was helping eventually with in the seminars, but I couldn't feel Byosen. And this is when I started with Chiyoko Sensei, and I was so ashamed. I felt so terrible about the fact that I couldn't feel it. And at first, I pretended I could. And then I said I can't, right? Because I just couldn't.
You cannot fake it. Yeah, you can fake it. Feel no, like, yeah.
And it didn't feel good to lie either. It just didn't feel good. But the treatments I was doing had results, so I knew something was happening. And probably if Chiyoko Sensei hadn't been there, I would have given up, I reckon. But it was just because I was learning with her, and she had such complete trust and faith that I just had to keep going. I just had to keep going, and there was no judgment whatsoever. It was just, she would come up, it touch me? How is it? Okay, just keep going, keep going, keep going. And, you know, and what I learned from it was, you know, the moment I started to feel it was in a moment where I stopped trying to feel it. That was when I felt it, you know. And what had happened, of course, was I was trying so hard. It was I was like, how can I be the one that's learning with Chiyoko sensei and I can't feel it? It's not, that's not okay, you know. And so once I gave up the trying and the self-judgment around it, then I could feel it. Suddenly I could feel it. Suddenly I was like, oh, this is it, you know. And so this was a big learning, one in terms of humility, I think, for me, and two in terms of now I get to really help my students. And those, some people feel it straight away, a lot of people, and some people can't. But I am, like Chiyoko sensei was, absolutely certain that they will. They just need to keep going, and they're probably trying too hard. Yeah.
I really appreciate you sharing that. That also has been like a question a lot of people, and they feel so insecure that a lot of times they drop the practice. And I remember one of the best, I did a Reiki master, and there was this woman who had been practicing for 25 years, and her energy was just delicious. There is no other word. Like, it was so beautiful. And she never felt any biosen, she didn't. And she said, I just trust. She was almost like a blind person. Like, she could not, but she said, I place my hands with love, and that's what I do. And I love that you share that story, because, you know, it's also, you were, again, with Chiyoko Yamaguchi, right? Like, you were like, so I really appreciate that, because I think a lot of us at the beginning, we may not feel a lot. It's just a question of practice and relaxing. That relaxing we're talking about beginning, like, Reiki is about allowing, and allowing, that's not our culture. Like, I don't know if like you guys, but especially in New York is type A, we don't allow, we control everything, right? So being vulnerable enough to drop and to just allow things and feeling safe enough, I think that is an amazing tip. And that actually is also a tip to deepen the practice. So the one tip I will ask you, and that's my last question, because I've been torturing you, but you are so good at answering questions, I don't want to let you go. It's a lot of people want to write a book, right? And obviously you both you especially have a background in writing. You also have done some personal writing. One simple tip for people that want to write that Reiki book and they've never done it. They always think they're going to do it and they struggle. And you're smiling because it will be hard. Like, that's the part people don't understand. Writing a book is a lot of discipline and hard, but maybe one tip from each of you.
Yeah, my tip would be to really look for something original inside yourself. For me, this comes through meditation often, no? Because you said specifically Reiki books, no? And I really feel we have enough Reiki books who copy what other Reiki book says. If you're planning to do a book like this, better don't do it. I mean, that's really my honest recommendation. But if you have something new to contribute, a perspective, if you find something what you always wanted to know and want to go deeper, I think then very clearly you will be carried. I think we can say this from our experience with this book, no? That although it took us much longer than we thought in the beginning, and in some points it was harder to get information than we had thought, it was always the feeling that we had lots of support, no? And not only like human support, but also a bigger support, no? And always, if I'm sitting down for a creative project, I'm always looking for this kind of feeling, no? That there's really something that wants to get expressed through me. It's not so much looking me for a topic, but emptying myself, a little bit like in Reiki practice, if allowing, no? And just sitting silent and seeing what really wants to get out of me. What is what I have to say.
I love that. Amanda.
Well, I actually would say the same thing in a slightly different way, probably, because I think it is probably the same thing, because I would say if you're desperate to write a Reiki book, but you don't know what it is you want to write, I don't know that you should be writing a Reiki book, because, you know, again, it's like, it's another version of trying too hard. And it begs the question that we were talking about earlier of why, what is it that makes you want to do that? And then I would go down that journey before I started anything, like, what is it I want from this, to get some inner knowledge around it. If, however, you have something specific that you really want to say, that really wants to get out, that feels like it wants to be contributed, then yes, do it. And just begin. That's what I would say. Just begin. And it's through the beginning of it that everything else begins to come, and if you wait until you've got everything before you begin, probably you'll never do it. So just start is what I would say if you have your thing.
I think it's fantastic. My first book was an illustrated guide. And actually, I started drawing the meditations because I had trouble remembering. And then I had like 50 drawing. I'm like, well, this may be a book. Like, so it's funny how sometimes you actually have like, you're halfway through and realize that actually this is not just a few drawings. This makes sense to share, right? And I like that original approach, because yes, there is a lot of books that are manuals. So, again, you can create your own manual and put it out there because you're going to create your own manual. And that for me, like I always advise people, create your own manual, because you learn what you want to teach when you do a manual or what you don't know yet. But yeah, like trying to bring a little bit of that originality, right? So thank you so much, both of you. I was dying to meet you. I'm just so grateful you gave me the time and you're sharing all this beautiful wisdom with everyone. There are no words. And now the words that you sent me about resilience, community make a lot more sense. So I did a drawing, and so I'm going to show it. Hopefully you can see it. It's a little bit hard to see.
Wow.
That's nice.
So I don't know if you can see it, but it's basically probably a more modern woman meditating, and again, the hara for me is very gateway to the universe. So there is this circle that creates the connection and the community, but also a circle is very resilient, right? It's really hard to break it. And this is probably our Japanese ancestor that gave us the practice. And then from her hara, there is this bird going to heaven. So also the gold and the silver is also non-duality. And then I don't use a lot of black in my drawings, but I like this fact that this woman was really grounded and stable. So I wanted to bring a way to drawing down. And then also these flowers are mostly for the earth, like stay here, be grounded, right? So, and yes, she's supporting, they're connected through the hand. I hope you can see it well. It's just
very beautiful. Great work, Nathalie.
Thank you so much. So those were your words, and I really enjoyed doing it. I enjoy a lot of drawing, but it's funny. It's a more delicate drawing. Sometimes my drawings are a little bit harsher or more colorful. This came up as a very resilient, but also very light and delicate. It was also the notion that we don't need to go out there and be very to be powerful. We can be into softness, into allowing, and still be very powerful, right? A different vision of what power is. So I really appreciate you sending me those 3 words. I think
you captured very well what we wanted to say with our book also. Maybe, Amanda, you can just briefly show the calligraphy on our book cover again, because it's a little similar also to what you did. This is kind of a kanji for Reiki in the middle, and around is a big variation of a kanji for, you say that's the kanji for women in Japanese, or female. So it's kind of a female holding the Reiki, and also as one is older kanjis and other newer kanjis, we also have this tradition and modern things connected, like you did with the circle and the hand on your shoulder. No, it's another kind of beautiful illustration of what we wanted to show. So thank you so much for capturing that. Great.
Thank you. No, and I love it because it's almost like the women are the womb where the Reiki survive. Like, it's beautiful.
Yeah. Well, and it shines out from within as well as them kind of holding and nurturing it. Yeah.
I love
it was done by Eri Luhmann, a calligraphy artist from Japan. She's now living in Portland, is a Reiki teacher and practitioner also. And we talked a lot with her about the idea of what we wanted to show, and she came up with this calligraphy, So yeah, great work by Eri.
Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you. And thank you for explaining, because I saw the cover. I'm like, Reiki catching something, because that's the other thing, like, and I know we have to practice and deepen our understanding through practice, but the more I'm also finding a little bit of history and the background, it does illuminate a little bit your understanding. And also, as you said, conveying meaning. Sometimes, like, there are ways to convey meaning. And I think, like when you find the clue what your cover is about, that is already so beautiful. So thank you so much for sharing all of this. And I will put all your contact information on the notes for everyone who wants to contact you for the book, also for classes. Again, your one is based in England, the other in Germany. So please reach out to Silke and Amanda. And I'm sorry, Silke, I pronounce the S in German as an S. So I hope it's okay to pronounce your name.
Perfect, Silke.
Okay.
That's perfect how you're saying it.
I try to learn German, and my German, I'm not going to even say a few words because every time I go to Germany, they're like, what? I'm like, oh. And I love German because I love Mozart's operas and I love to understand what they say. But I have no talent for German. So thank you so much, both.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah,
great conversation, very interesting questions. Was really a pleasure.
I really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much.